So in this video I'm going to show you how to turn a normal hard drive or USB SSD or USB hard drive into a NAS. So basically hard drive like this, which you would normally get from Synology, QNAP or Western Digital, which has a LAN port at the back, which means that instead of accessing the data as one user at a time through USB or SATA port, you will be able to access data from this hard drive through the network. So either in the same network in your home or business, or even away from the home while you're on holiday, you'll be able to access the data on your hard drive while it's still at home. So I'm going to teach you how to turn a normal hard drive into a NAS drive. There are several different ways to do that, but I'm going to be showing you how to achieve this using Raspberry Pi. This is a mini micro computer in a box. You can get it for $30, $40, maybe $50 based on which model you go for. So this is the latest model, which is Pi5. It's going to cost you around $50. You'll need that. You'll need a SD card and some sort of hard drive, either it's SATA based or it's USB external drive, or it could be also a DAS box which has a RAID as well and connects through the USB to your computer. As you can see, I have already used this Desk Pi Rackmate desktop based rack cabinet where I have mounted this Raspberry Pi, also a Kingston hard drive which is SATA based. I have connected LAN cable to it, HDMI cable which goes to the screen, and USB-C cable which gives it a power. So what I'm going to do first is insert SD card, and then I'm going to show you what's going on the screen. You insert that card on the opposite side of USB ports. So the USB is front, at the back, at the bottom there is SD card slot where you slide this card in and you're good to go. So this is the screen you'll be seeing. You'll need to press and hold the shift key. So this will skip the boot mode and go into a setup mode. So it's going to download a bootloader, like an app, which will allow you to install any operating system you want to put on this micro computer. So now you can first choose which model you have purchased, which Raspberry Pi. I have Raspberry Pi 5. You can navigate with tab and confirm your options with enter button. There are quite a few operating systems available already, pre-configured, what you can install on your Raspberry Pi. By default, you will install Pi OS, which is their own branded operating system. Obviously, all of them are Linux based, but this is what normally people choose as a default. Let's go through the options quickly if you were curious what other options are there. So for example, other general purpose OS, which means you could install Ubuntu Linux. Then if you want to install some sort of media player operating system, there are several audio based operating systems you could install and turn this Raspberry Pi into that sort of audio server. Then you can create a game console out of it if you wanted to. You can install some retro gaming OS and play your retro games on this and turn it into your arcade machine. Or you can go for other specific purpose operating systems. So for 3D printing, you can have Home Assistant, Kali Linux. You can turn this into smart photo frame with full page OS. You can turn it into access point, turn it into some light show solution. You can turn it into another smart photo frame or smart mirror in a way. You could see your news, weather, all these things displayed on your screen when connecting this Raspberry Pi with any sort of TV or screen. You can turn it into VEX Tournament Manager, or you can turn it into Debian-based remote desktop operating system for gaming. You can turn it into Web3 Pi, which will allow you to monitor your network. Then there's freemium and paid operating systems you can choose from. Some digital signage operating system, 3D printing, Android OS. If you want to turn it into a tablet, for example, or you want to turn it maybe into Think Linux system. And there are some other options. If you want to restore a default settings, you can choose this bootloader, or if you want multi-boot OS, you can install that, or you can simply choose to erase your SD card, or you can use some custom OS ISO file that you have. You can install that through this option. If it's not on the list, what I was showing you earlier, you can have your ISO ready and you can burn it into this SD card. So if you want to turn this Raspberry Pi into NAS, you'll need to choose the model that we have purchased, in my case Raspberry Pi 5, and the operating system will need to be a limited edition. We'll need edition without a desktop. And that could be Raspberry Pi OS Lite. Let's go for a 64-bit option. Then we choose where we want to install it on SD card, and click Next. Choose No. You're happy to format the SD? Yes. So at this point, Raspberry Pi is ready to be used. The OS is installed, all pre-configured. So now we're going to turn this thing into a NAS server. If you didn't create a username and password during the setup, it's going to be default username and password, PI and Raspberry Pi, I think. Make sure your software is up to date, so use sudo apt update command. That should bring it to the latest version. And then if you want to install OpenMediaVault, you'll need to do sudo wget and the rest of the line you see. That's it, we have installed OpenMediaVault server. So there's an IP address at the top, how you can access it. So technically the server is running right now. That's the IP address, 192.168.144. You can access this server either from your mobile device or your laptop or computer. All you need to do is just open the browser and put that IP address in there. So this is it, the NAS server is running already, but there are a couple of things we'll need to do before we actually use it. We'll need to change default username and password. You need to connect the disks you want to use for the storage. Also, we need to wipe them clean. Then we'll create a file system on those disks, create a shared folder, enable SMB service so you can connect to these drives remotely or through the network. And then we will look at other options and config like plugins, the option how to install Docker and so on. So default username is admin and password is OpenMediaVault. And we are in. So the first thing you should do is change your password and username. As a user interface, you can switch into dark mode if that is easier on your eye. The first step we need to do is connect our media. That's your hard drives, your USB drives, whatever you want to use for your storage. You need to connect that to your Raspberry Pi. So I'll be using a SATA adapter to USB to connect one of the SSDs. There are many different ways you can connect storage media, either through USB directly or obviously USB sticks directly. If you want to connect hard drives, you will need to have a docking station where you can just slot it in and connect through USB again. Or you can use SATA adapters. There are also accessories for Raspberry Pi which you can connect, and you'll be able to use NVMe SSDs. So in my case, I'll only connect SATA, SSD and NVMe through USB. Then we need to go to storage, disks, and here you can see the SD card is coming up, which is 8 GB. Do not format that or wipe that at any point, that's your system. And then there comes up 100 GB storage. So I'll disconnect this Thunderbolt USB NVMe SSD drive because it seems like it doesn't work with a Raspberry Pi. But I'll keep the SSD, which is 100 gigabyte SATA based SSD. So let's wipe that. Confirm, yes. Do a quick wipe. All done. So once that is wiped, go to File Systems and then click Create. And then you can choose what file system you want to have. Either BTRFS, which is self-healing file system, or ext4, which you will normally find on regular NAS like Synology, QNAP and other brands. We also have other options like F2FS and JFS and XFS file systems. The most popular is ext4, so this is what we're gonna choose. So we choose which drive we want to format using this file system and click Save. I'll also connect a USB stick for testing reasons and wipe this flash drive. All done. And I'll also put ext4 file system on it. So technically you can even turn flash drive into a NAS drive. It's really up to you what you use. Manual hard drives, SSDs, flash drives, whatever comes in your mind. If you wanted to RAID two storage devices together, like two hard drives, and have like RAID 1 mirror, so if one drive fails, the other one has a copy of your data, you'll need to install a RAID plugin. So let's try doing that. Let's go to plugins, type mdadm, click install. Yes. So that's all done. So if you want to create a RAID, for example, if you have 3 drives, you can have RAID 5, which means one drive can fail, but your data is still accessible and distributed across the remaining drives. Or with 2 SSDs, for example, you can have a mirror. So let's go to multiple device, create, and then you have options RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID 10, or mirror. Drive means it's RAID 0. So basically it's going to write on all of the drives at the same time. So it's going to merge those drives into one piece. Mirror means it's going to mirror one drive to another. Linear means JBOD, which means it's going to gradually store data on the first disk. When the first disk is full, it's going to move on to second, third, and so on until all disks are filled up. And then RAID 10, it means if you have 4 drives or more, it's going to split in between those old drives and have mirror from one side and mirror another side. RAID 5, one drive with redundancy, and RAID 6, one drive redundancy, which means one drive can fail or 2 drives can fail and your data is still safe. So a little tip, you cannot create RAID on USB connected devices. So you'll need to connect either DAS box, which has a RAID controller built in inside the box. So you actually have hardware RAID inside that box. So you don't need to think about, you don't need to overload Raspberry Pi to run the RAID. But if you do want to have a RAID, for example, if you have 2 NVMe's through the expansion port, you can RAID them together. So you can connect expansions like SATA boards or NVMe boards through this PCIe slot on the left edge of the board. So you can get accessories like this, where you can connect NVMe SSD, or you can have these kind of SATA based boards that you can connect. So once you have done your RAID, if you wanted to have a RAID, otherwise if you have applied the file system, the next step is to create a shared folder. So you go to shared folders, create, give it a name. So shared folders means basically folders on your NAS, which you can give access to different people, and you can set different access rights for every user. So there's user management for these folders. So you can say specific groups or people can access specific folders. If you can't choose file system, maybe we need to go back to file systems and check what's going on there. After creating those file systems, don't forget to mount them. Choose which one you want to mount. So this is our SSDs. You can set up a warning system, so it's going to notify you when the disks are getting full. You can also add some tags. So click save. It becomes online status, which means it's good to go. You can also mount another file system from other SSD. Click save, and then don't forget to save the changes. And when you click apply, that's when it's effective. And then you can go to shared folders, create videos, for example, choose which file system or which SSD you want to add. And then you can choose what access rights there are. It means all admins can write and read from the folder. If this is a Plex server, you might want to give this option, read only for others, or if it's the LNA server. Otherwise, if it's your private data documents, you should have no access to others, and there should be only access to a user. So we'll leave this as an option here and click save. And then click apply. Just a little tip as well, just to keep things secure, you need to go to services and make sure SSH is not enabled, because this allows people through command line to connect to the core of your operating system on Raspberry Pi. This shouldn't be enabled unless you actually need that. So the last step is to map your NAS to your computer. We could do that in several different ways. The most popular is SMB option to connect. This means on your computer, if you go to My Computer, Network Places, you'll see network drive available there. You can map that through SMB service. Apple and Linux systems might use NFS protocol to connect to these NAS drives, but the most popular is SMB. What we need to do is click enabled. If your work group name is different, you can change that to match. You can also enable recycle bin, which means if someone is going to delete something, it will first go to recycle bin. It's not going to be wiped from your system, so you can recover some files this way. You can choose which SMB protocol you want. I would recommend to go for the latest one, the most secure, and then click save and apply. So you can go open your Finder or Windows Explorer and then click go, connect to server. And then you can type in the IP address that you used for the server. You could have a manual IP address, so just in case if your router reboots, you don't lose the access to your server. You could go to network interfaces and go to your Ethernet settings and change IP address to fixed or static. So we'll need to type in the IP address of the server and click connect. Click connect, type in the password of OpenMediaVault account. So if we want to connect to the NAS through SMB, we'll need to go to settings, to SMB CIFS, then click shares as well, because you'll need to have manually linked share with this connection, this SMB. So choose which shared folder we want to allow access to through SMB service. Enable recycle bin. You can also choose if the share is going to be public or not. So you can say guests allowed, because this is just a video folder. Click save and apply. So now this shared folder is allowed to be connected to through SMB service. So you can go back to mapping a shared folder. Let's double check the user settings. So there is one user, which is Ed. I'll just double check the password again. Save that. I change the password for a user to make sure I'm not making a mistake. Let's try and connect again. And there we go. Now we have a new folder for our NAS on the Raspberry Pi. So videos, we can put some new files or folders. Raspberry Pi NAS folder. And this is it. Now you know how to connect to your hard drive like this through the network instead of directly connecting through USB or SATA. But before I go, I'm just going to show you what other options are there in admin panel. So you can have your dashboard. So in dashboard you can add or remove things you want to see, what's going on with your server. So how much memory is used, for example, what the load averages are, what's the CPU use, IP addresses, and so on. Then obviously in the system you can set some workbench settings. So this is how you're going to connect to this admin panel, what you're seeing right now. So you can change a port, for example, to something more unique. So if, just in case, if you're using port forwarding or something, hackers could not figure out what sort of services you're running, like NAS service. Port is usually used to identify what sort of services you're running. You can obviously enable SSL as well if you want to purchase a certificate, but that's not something what you need in home environment. But you may need that if you want to open ports and access your NAS through the internet. You can set the time zone, or you can choose to have automated time zone setting. You can set notifications. You can have SMTP server enabled, which means you'll receive an email if there is some alert, something going on with your NAS, whatever you choose to be alerted about. There are certain events you can choose. Then there's power management settings. You can choose what happens when you click power button. You can schedule some tasks. You can schedule reboot or shutdown or standby certain times of the week and day. You can enable monitoring service. These are more general schedules you can set up. You can choose what time, what day, what happens. You can type in the command and it's going to execute it in a terminal at those times. So these are crons. Then you can install some certificates or SSH access keys to access your NAS more secure way if it's in a business environment or across the internet. Then some update management. If there'll be updates, you'll see them listed here. You can also have a setting for updates, which means that it will automatically install updates if you wanted to. And then obviously there are plugins. You can install all sorts of things here. I can see you cannot find Docker or Plex installation here, but I'll show you in other videos how to install Plex or Docker if you want to play with those things and turn your NAS, your Raspberry Pi NAS, into a multimedia server like Netflix, but Plex. Then I'll show you that on a different video. Just let me know if you are interested. Then you get some OMV extras like Docker. So this is actually an easy way how to enable Docker. Docker is very useful because you can have so many containers running at the same time. It's like virtual machines, but miniature version of it. You can have your Plex, your whatever comes in your mind. So many options. You can go to Docker website and see the list of apps you can install. It's like an app service. You can go to network settings. You can have general settings. You can change the name for your Raspberry Pi. You can see interfaces, which is LAN connection. You can change things like IP address. DHCP means it's automatically getting IP address every time it reboots. The router is going to give IP. Or you can set it static if you want to access your NAS drive through the same IP all the time. It's a more reliable way of doing this. And there's also a handy feature. You can change your MAC address on your LAN connection through this OpenMediaVault interface, which could be very interesting for someone. And there's also something very useful like Wake on LAN, which means if you want to keep your NAS off for most of the time and only wake it up when you want to use it. Wake on LAN will allow you to switch on your NAS even across the internet on the other side of the world. All it takes is an app. For example, if you have Synology router, they also support Wake on LAN. You'll have an app and you click a button, say switch on this NAS. You can configure your proxies if you wanted to and set up some firewall rules to keep things secure. Then obviously in storage settings you will see all your disks. You can do smart settings like testing your hard drives on a regular basis, and you can have your scheduled tasks regarding storage like self-testing and things like that. Then obviously there's multiple devices. If you have installed the RAID, you can manage your RAID. File systems, you can choose what file system you want to have on your hard drives. And obviously shared folders, where you can create folders and have different access rights for every user or user group. They can have services. You can enable rsync if you wanted to synchronize two servers between each other, either the same brand, Raspberry Pi, or maybe it's QNAP Synology and Raspberry Pi. You can use rsync to sync those folders. You can set a task. When do you want to have this rsync service running? Or you can create a server for rsync, and then other devices can connect to this NAS. And obviously SMB shares, you can enable SMB shares, and you can also choose which shared folders are linked to this SMB connection. You can enable SSH if you want command line access. You can have user management. You can choose, you can link a home folder if you wanted to, or you can create new users if you wanted to as well. You can choose what group they belong to. And then you have some diagnostics data, system logs if you wanted to see what's going on. You can have remote access to your system logs. You can see what processes are running, what's using most of the CPU or memory. You can see the status for your SMB, NFS or SSH. But otherwise this is it. This was a video on how to turn a hard drive or SSD or NVMe or any type of flash drive or USB based docking station into a NAS using Raspberry Pi. If you want to see me turning this Raspberry Pi into different things like Plex server, multimedia server, some sort of photo manager, smart frames and other things, let me know. Otherwise I will see you next time.